Welcome to our special live coverage of the Noor Salman trial here on clickorlando.com. I'm Lisa Bell. In just hours, jury selection will begin for the trial of the Pulse gunman's widow. As this trial develops, we here at News 6 are bringing you the very latest, both on air and on clickorlando.com. And tonight, News 6 legal analyst Mark O'Mara joins me in studio with what we can expect tomorrow as jury selection gets underway in this very high-profile trial. First, Mark, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Well, it's the night before the trial. So what is going through the minds of prosecutors and defense attorneys as they prepare for jury selection to get underway?
Well, you know, those last-minute things to make sure that you're perfectly ready. And I will tell you right now, part of what they're doing is social media inquiries on all these jurors, because they do have some of the information about the jurors, and they're going to be able to use that information to try and get ready for what's going to be a very slow and sort of labored process over the next week or so.
So are they kind of cramming right now?
You're not supposed to cram the night before the exam or the night before trial starts, but it's really hard not to. Just trying to get in those last-minute philosophy questions about how to handle it, what to do in response to what we know the government is going to do, and vice versa.
There will be 12 jurors for this trial. There are 600 potential jurors that they are going to be interviewing. They also need some alternates. You believe they could need as many as 6 alternates.
I think
so what are some of the questions that they're going to be asking these potential jurors?
Well, they're going to be broken down into different sort of stages. The first stage is going to be what we call individual or sequestered voir dire. That's where you talk to one juror at a time. It's going to be very boring if anyone was sitting there watching it, because one juror will walk in, maybe 10, 12 minutes of conversations with both attorneys, and they'll be asked questions about pretrial publicity generally. What do you know about the case? And the reason why we have to ask those questions is there is going to be a spectrum of knowledge. They're going to know innuendos and rumors and stories and biases and prejudices. So they have to get through all of that. The main purpose of which is to bring to the surface what they know about it, and then convince them and get their agreement that they're going to set that all aside. Because whatever they know about the case, whatever biases they may bring, this case has to be tried only on what comes into the courtroom through the evidence and the witnesses. And if they get that commitment from the juror, then almost anything that they've heard about, if they can set it aside, is what they're trying to do.
Jury selection, obviously very critical, but I mean, based on what you're saying, it could take some time.
I think it's going to take most of a week to get a jury, because even though there are 600, what I think Judge Byron will do is get about 50 to 100 of those jurors who have been through the selection process, the individual selection process.
Who do they want sitting on this jury?
Well, prosecutors want law and order. They want people who are going to listen to the law and apply it, and not act on sympathy, and not act on empathy for a woman who is now going to be suggested maybe to be abused, maybe to be suffering of some mental disorders of some sort. So what prosecutors want is retired military engineers, maybe, who are going to listen to the facts and apply the law without any emotions. Defense, on the other hand, is going to want some people who are going to feel for a woman who seemingly may have been abused by her husband, who may have some mental health concerns. But interesting enough, the defense is also going to want people who are willing to analyze this case and say, wait a minute, we're not going to get caught up in the absolute tragedy of the loss of 49 lives and the destruction of 49 families. We're going to hold the government to their standard, and that is they have to convince each and every one of them beyond a reasonable doubt, and on a circumstantial evidence case, which in effect this is, that any reasonable hypothesis of innocence, that she's not guilty even though she was married to the person who could do this, that they have to prove their case and exclude every hypothesis of innocence. So it's not just warm and fuzzy jurors for the defense. They also want people who are going to hold the government to their burden, and it's a very high burden.
Well, we do want to bring in News 6's Nadine Yanis now. She will be in the courtroom for this trial. She joins us live from the federal courthouse in Orlando. And Nadine, a lot of new documents were released today. What can you tell us about them?
Well, Lisa, these are unsealed documents, pages upon pages, that really play into what defense that Noor Salman's attorneys might be presenting over the next 6 weeks or so of trial. Two main things to take away from these documents this morning, and some things that we knew, but they are now in black and white. One is how the defense is trying to play up how Salman was severely abused at the hands of Omar Mateen, so much so that she was in fear of her life, and that could possibly have played into some of her actions leading up to the Pulse attack. Another thing is that the documents say that a doctor testifies that she is highly susceptible to giving a false confession. Now, this is key because one of our other legal analysts that I spoke with a couple weeks ago had told us that he feels like a 12-page confession that is in Salman's handwriting is going to be game, set, match for the prosecution. Even though that the burden of proof is high, it's in her own words, things that she admitted to the FBI, that she went around Pulse with Omar Mateen the week before the attack, and that she went to Disney Springs with him as well, and that he had said statements to her even that night before he left the house that made her believe that he was going to attack the Pulse nightclub. This was all on the confession, but again, these documents show that the defense is going to try to bring in this forensic psychologist, that he's going to say, well, she's highly susceptible to giving false confessions, and that was huge today in these documents here, Lisa.
Yeah, and Nadine, we do know it was another emotional day in downtown Orlando. You spoke with Pulse survivors today. They were at the nightclub today meeting with shooting survivors from Parkland. What are they saying before this trial begins?
You know, it was interesting. It was hard for me to even approach the subject as they were there in tears, hand in hand with Parkland students who stopped by Pulse. But it's happening tomorrow, and I just wanted to get their feeling on approaching this. If they're going to be watching this, if they are going to be here in physical attendance. A couple of them wouldn't even tell me. They said they want nothing to do about it. They didn't want to go on camera. They didn't want to talk about it. Another survivor says, I hope she gets what she deserves, believing that Salman knew. And there's another survivor who, with tears in his eyes, says that he just wants justice to prevail and he's going to trust this system. And ultimately, it's going to be down to that jury who's going to decide whether or not she helped Mateen pull off the attack.
It's all getting underway in just hours. Nadine Yanis, thank you. Mark O'Mara, thank you for joining us in studio. And because this is a federal trial, no cameras or recording devices are permitted inside the courtroom. News 6 and ClickOrlando.com will have reporters at the trial every day. We have a special page detailing everything with this trial on ClickOrlando.com. Just look for the Noor Salman tab. And be sure to join us tomorrow morning for another discussion about the trial. Before it begins, our coverage will begin at 8:30 right here on ClickOrlando.com. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Lisa Bell.